Hi, I'm attorney Amanda Shaffer. Today I'm going to talk about some breaking news that has come out recently from USCIS about their announcement to waive certain interviews for Form I-751s. And this is big news because for a long time, at least 4, 5, 6 years now, they claimed they were not waiving interviews for anyone who filed I-751s, although we did have some that were waived. But this new announcement gives us a little bit more insight into what type of applications they are looking to waive the interviews. And the purpose, of course, is to speed up the processing, because if you're going through the process right now or have recently gone through it, you know that it is taking quite a long time, as in a year and a half plus. So I'll get to that in 1 second. Just a few quick reminders to make sure that you like us, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you are watching this, so that you don't miss any of our lives. And if you find this information helpful or know someone who will, click on that share button so we can get the information out there. So the first question you might be thinking is, what is an I-751? This is the form that you file to remove conditions on your permanent residence. And what that means is, if you obtained your green card based on marriage, and you've been married for less than 2 years at the time of your interview, which is either abroad at consular processing at the embassy, or in the United States if you did an adjustment of status, then when you get your green card, you are going to get a 2-year green card, not a 10-year green card. So you will be a conditional permanent resident, not a permanent resident. And the reason is they want to make sure that you are still married and still intending to spend the rest of your life with your spouse 2 years down the line, to cut down on marriage fraud. So in the 90-day period before the 2-year anniversary of getting your green card, so if you get your green card today, then you go 2 years from today. Today's April 13th, so 2 years is April 12th, 2024. So that's your deadline to file your I-751, and you file it in the 3-month period up preceding that date, and it will be the expiration date on your 2-year green card. The only exception, you can file earlier. When do I file? Is the next one. You can file earlier if you are not filing jointly. So if there's divorce or abuse, death, extreme hardship, and I'll talk a little more about that in a second. So that's when you have to do it, and that's who has to do it. So who is going to have their interviews waived? Well, we don't know exactly. And what I'm always going to tell people is, the more evidence you have, the better. So the first criteria is sufficient evidence of your bona fide or good faith marriage. Basically, this is all that evidence we submit to prove that you have a real relationship. So if you watch some of our other videos where I talk about types of marriage evidence, I won't go, you can find all that there. I'm not going to go into too many details right now, but essentially, this is where we put in the birth certificates of children, joint tax returns, joint bills, joint bank statements, photographs, whatever the case may be. There's no exact number or pieces of evidence or types of evidence that is going to magically get your interview waived. I can look at your evidence for you and tell you, I think you have a good shot at it, but you never know. Because again, number one, that's only one of the criteria. Number two, each person who looks at the evidence you submit is going to have a different opinion. So one officer might say, hey, there's enough evidence there, and the next might say there isn't. So the more the merrier, basically. So that's the first thing they're going to look at. How much evidence do you have that you have a real marriage, and how good is this evidence? And again, if you look at some of our other videos, when I talk about the types of evidence to submit in these cases, not all evidence is created equal. So a photograph of you and your spouse is great, but anyone can pose for a photograph, even if they're not married. And having a joint bank account is great, but if you don't use the joint bank account, it doesn't really help that much. They want to show that you're actually joining your finances and using it together. The next type of case that they're going to waive are waiver cases. And I kind of mentioned those. Thank you for watching. Always watching, Lambert. We appreciate it. So for waiver cases, these are what I mentioned earlier. So if you married in good faith, but your marriage ended due to divorce or death, that's a waiver case. And again, this is the type of case that you do not have to wait until that 3-month period before the 2-year anniversary of having your green card. If you entered your marriage in good faith, but were the victim of abuse, it could be physical or mental abuse. That's another type of waiver. And there's also another type of waiver you don't have to wait until that 3-month period. And then there's an extreme hardship waiver. These are the hardest, in my opinion, waivers to submit. You have to have a really good reason for not having a joint filing with an extreme hardship as opposed to the other two. So we generally focus on divorce, death, abuse waivers, but it makes sense because the reason they call you in for the interview is basically kind of like a repeat of your green card interview or your marriage petition interview, where they want to make sure that you ask questions about your marriage. If there's enough evidence, they don't need to ask you about it. If you're no longer in the relationship, they don't need to ask you about it, but they can. So, and just to clarify, if you're just tuning in now, these are not automatic waivers for these interviews, for anything I'm talking about. These are the categories that if you fall into, you have the best chance of getting your interview waived. And in our experience, when we submit a lot of evidence for clients, really good evidence, their interviews can get waived. And we do have a good amount that get waived, even before this announcement when they said they were waiving no interviews. The next thing that you need to have, these aren't, again, exclusive categories. So some of these overlap and some of these are separate. So if you have a joint filing, you're not going to have a waiver case at the same time. But for for joint filings and waiver cases, you cannot have any indication of fraud or misrepresentation. And they didn't elaborate on this, but my assumption would be, and if we want to be safe, they mean not just with the marriage, but in general. No fraud, no misrepresentation. The next thing is no complex facts or issues to resolve. What's a complex fact or issue that you wouldn't have dealt with during your adjustment? Or in your counsel interview, it may be something that you've already dealt with. So sometimes we tell clients, if you had an issue with your entry and you filed for a waiver and everything's all good now, you might still have to explain it again while you go through the process, the rest of the immigration process. So that can be a complex factor issue. Off the top of my head, I don't know what else. They haven't elaborated on this one, but my assumption would be maybe a situation where the spouses live separately and they said they were gonna be, once they got the green card, live together, but they still live separately, or who knows. Or sometimes they do visits to the house to see if you're both living there. Maybe they saw you're not. They usually do that on the first level for when you first get the green card, but they can do it throughout if they get it, especially if they get a tip. So maybe that's what they mean. But again, this is something, if I reviewed your individual case, I'd be able to tell you, okay, this is really complicated. You're probably gonna have an interview. One, I think actually that comes to mind is if this is your second conditional green card based on marriage. So you had one, that marriage didn't work out, you got remarried, were able to get another green card, I could see them calling you in for that, even if you have all the marriage evidence in the world. So things like that. And then finally, no criminal history that would make the conditional resident removable. Again, this is something that if you have any criminal history at all, even if you had an arrest and it was dismissed, you should plan on being called back for another interview. But if you have any criminal history that can make you removable, that means that they can try to deport you by putting you in removal proceedings. Then number one, make sure you contact a lawyer before you file your I-751 to make sure that you're not removable. If you are possibly removable, you definitely want to have a lawyer come with you to the interview. And then you have to see what you can do if you are placed in removal proceedings. But if you don't apply for the I-751 or for the 10-year green card in that time period I mentioned, then you're going to lose your conditional resident status and be placed in removal proceedings. So it's very, 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 very important that you file the I-751 on time. I've said this before, and I'll say it plenty of times. I might be a little biased here, but I've been doing this for a very long time, and if your best chance to get your interview waived is by doing the application with a lawyer. We will make sure that we have as much evidence as possible, that you don't have any complex issues or facts, or if you do, we can try to explain them ahead of time. And we can also review your criminal history and make sure that that's not going to get in the way. If you had a joint filing and now you need to convert it to a waiver case, that's also something that it gets a little complicated, and you're going to want to have a lawyer help you with that as well. So that's really all that they announced about regarding the interview waivers. Again, for us, not really that new news, because I know in the past few years we've had a few waived, but very, very few. In the past, it was more. So this is how it used to be, I think. They're going back to that, and hopefully that will clear up some of the backlog. But if you need any help with your filing your I-751 or your marriage case, our contact information has been scrolling across the bottom of the screen on YouTube and Facebook, on Instagram. If you go to our profile page, I think they call it, then you can find our information there. And I will I'll put it in the comment section after I post the final video. And if you have any questions about this as well, please do not hesitate to contact us. So that is all for today. Don't forget to like us and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you are watching. And if you found this helpful or know someone who does, please hit that share button so we can get this information out to other people as well. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.